بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق أجمعين سيدنا محمد عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا وعملا صالحا متقبلا ورزقا حلالا طيبا يا أكرم الأكرمين وبعد. First of all, Jazakumullah khairan for joining us back, those who were with us before Ramadan in the last class, and those the new brothers and sisters who are joining us. We welcome you and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless your steps here, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant you the thawab and the reward for taking the effort to come and join these gatherings that we hope inshallah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will write down our names among the students of knowledge, among the people who want to pursue this sacred knowledge of knowing his deen and knowing the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One day Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with him, he came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said, Ya Rasulullah, you are more beloved to me than everything in my life except for my own self, except for my nafs. So actually the Prophet ﷺ responded to him saying, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ, by the one my soul is within his hands, no, until I'm more beloved to you than your own self. حَتَّى أَكُونَ أَحَبَّ إِلَيْكَ مِن نَفْسِكَ. So Umar radiallahu anhu, he paused for a second and he kept thinking about this. He didn't just emotionally reacted and saying, oh yeah, yes, Ya Rasulullah, I actually love you even more than myself. He just absorbed this thought for a second and then he responded back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said, وَالَّذِي أَنزَلَ عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابِ, by the one who sent down the book on you, now you are more beloved to me than myself. لَأَنْتَ أَحَبَّ إِلَيَّ مِن نَفْسِ الَّتِي بَيْنَ جَنْبَيْ. So he responded back sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, الْآنَ يَا عُمَرْ. He said, now is the right time. Now you got it right. Now you understood my position in your life, the centrality of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not only as a human being but as the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the life of every single Muslim. One of the tabi'een said, "Man lam yara wilayat al-Rasul alayhi fi jami' al-ahwal." If you do not think that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is your role model that you have to follow in all of your different affairs and states, and whoever doesn't see himself within the realm of the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he will never be able to taste the sweetness of his sunnah. لا يذوق حلاوة سنتي. And he used that word literally, the sweetness of the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من والده وولده والناس أجمعين. Said, no one of you will have a complete full faith until I'm more beloved to him than his family, than his wealth, and than his own self. This is the way we are required to connect with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this connection, we can summarize it in the word love. That we love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But specifically when we talk about loving the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we talk about two different levels of love. There is the emotional, personal love that you have towards the human being, that you love him because of this personal connection you develop, of course, not only or not with a personal connection, I mean an actual living connection, but with the connection with the deen, with the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, with his seerah and with his life story. The other connection of love we have with the Prophet ﷺ is the way we follow him. That's why it's not easy to claim. You cannot just say, I love the Prophet. Right? If you say, I love whoever, a human being that you know and you can connect with, you have to provide a kind of an evidence or a proof that you love him. But when we Muslims nowadays in this modern time, we claim that we love the Prophet ﷺ, we are also required to prove some kind of, or to provide some kind of evidences that, what is your dalil? How are you sure that you love the Prophet ﷺ? If I want to ask a question that we want to introduce this class with, that what are the signs of love to the Prophet ﷺ? What are the signs if you see it in a person, you would say this person actually loves the Prophet ﷺ? What do you think? Follow the sunnah. What else? Other than the follow of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is of course one of the signs of the love of the Prophet ﷺ, but how can you tell more that this person has a bigger connection or a strong connection with the Prophet ﷺ? Yes.
They mention him a lot.
They mention him a lot.
They study him.
They study him. Okay. They mention him a lot is one of the really important signs, because this class is about this. Because in this class, in this course, we're going to mention him a lot. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We are going to mention the name of the Prophet ﷺ every single time, multiple times in every single class. You know, when we talked in the first course about the different Islamic sciences and the introductory principles of the Islamic sciences, and then the scholars have this beautiful debate between the sciences and the scholars of these different sciences, which science is better. So the scholars of fiqh, they would say, the fiqh science is actually better because it basically corrects the rituals and the acts of worship of a Muslim. The scholars of aqidah would say the aqidah is better because it corrects the thoughts of the Muslim and makes his aqidah straightforward. The scholars of tafsir, they would say the tafsir is better because we deal with the book of Allah. Everyone has his own angle of basically giving a kind of a preference to his own science and branch of knowledge. But usually when the scholars of hadith, and this is something that one of my shaykh used to tell us, usually when the scholars of hadith get into this discussion, they always win. He said once the scholars of hadith get in from this angle of looking at the different sciences, hadith includes seerah too. They say we are the best of the sciences. Because we are all the time saying Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Because we are making this salah. One of the best dhikr the Muslim would do is to send his greetings and blessings to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So if we only have this merit, that would be enough for us. Because the scholars of hadith basically all the time they are dealing with texts that are reported from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, or that are talking about the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So for how many times they say sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they said this is enough merit for us to be the best of the sciences. And this is a merit that we will have in this course, inshallah. And it's the kind of salah or prayer that is absolutely accepted. The only 100% accepted dua is saying Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, because this dua will never be rejected from Allah. That's why if you remember last course we talked about the dua and the etiquettes of dua. We said when you start making dua, you praise Allah first, and then the second, you do what? You say Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, or you praise the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in some way. So one of the reasons why would we do that in the dua, because it's an accepted dua, it's dua mustajab. And if it is accepted, you're hoping that whatever dua coming next, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hopefully will accept it. So you're introducing your dua with the accepted dua. So mentioning the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is one of the signs of loving the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sorry, you mentioned one more? Yeah. Studying the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is inshallah, of course, the main goal of this class. What else? How do you tell if a person, or if you love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Considering him the main reference of our actions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that in the Quran. وَلَوْ رَدُّوهُ إِلَى الرَّسُولِ وَإِلَى أُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْهُمْ. Yes.
Showing respect when he's mentioned.
Showing respect when he's mentioned, and this is very important. To show respect and the highest level of respect when the name of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is mentioned, or when something related to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is also mentioned. The Sahaba after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam died, they used to say about them that they would never mention the name of the Prophet ﷺ except if they are like in the highest level of khushu'. Khushu' means they are very humble, they are very like humiliated by talking and mentioning the name of the Prophet ﷺ. And most of the times they will be crying. And most of the times they say they would like their bodies, the narration says the bodies are shivering by mentioning the name of the Prophet ﷺ, because they have developed both the personal loving connection with him ﷺ, and of course the love to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another sign of loving the Prophet ﷺ is to love whoever he loved. So if he loved someone, you should love him. You should love him. If he loved his companions and he praised them, you need to love his companions. If he loved his wives, the Quran called them to be our mothers, we need to love them. His household and his Ahlul Bayt, he loves them ﷺ, so we need to love them. So whoever a person the Prophet ﷺ loved, it's part of your connection of love with the Prophet ﷺ is to love him. One of the signs of loving the Prophet ﷺ is to always yearn and wish to meet with him. You always think that I really wish if I meet with the Prophet ﷺ. You always wish that I hope on the day of judgment Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant me the ni'mah of meeting with the Prophet ﷺ. One man came to him once, to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, Ya Rasulullah, you are more beloved to me than my entire family. and even then my wealth. And sometimes I'm at home, I cannot wait until I come and see you. I'm always in that state of shawq, in that state of yearning, like waiting for our meeting with you. And then he said, but I kept thinking about what is going to happen to me and what is going to happen to you on the day of judgment. So I realized that sad fact that on the day of judgment you will be in the highest ranks of Jannah, but I will be, Allahu A'lam, wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees for me. He said, I felt so sad for this, that I'm not sure if I would have a kind of companionship with you on the day of judgment. He's not only worried about this dunya, he's actually worried about the hereafter. He said, okay, this dunya, Allah blessed me to witness this period of time that you are living in. But I don't know what is going to happen to me on the day of judgment. The Prophet ﷺ felt so like emotional for that companion, but he couldn't provide him with anything because it's something that is only in the hands of Allah. So he didn't respond to him. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed an ayah for this situation. And he said, وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَالرَّسُولَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ مِنَ النَّبِيِّينَ وَالصِّدِّيقِينَ وَالشُّهَدَاءِ وَالصَّالِحِينَ. Whoever obeys Allah and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, those will be on the day of judgment among the prophets, among the martyrs, among the salihin, the righteous people. So once this ayah was revealed, the Prophet ﷺ called on this person and he recited this ayah to him to give him that glad tidings that this is your way. If you want to be with me on the day of judgment, you need to follow this ayah, to obey Allah and to obey the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you always need to question yourself. How do you love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And do you like yearn for a meeting with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam or not? And from his side, he already like sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he already said and asserted that he loves us. He already said that. And he said, إِنَّ مِنْ أَشَدِّ أُمَّتِي لِي حُبَّ النَّاسُ يَكُونُونَ مِنْ بَعْدِ. And he said that there will be part of my ummah who would come after me. They would never see me, but they would come after me and they love me more than anyone else. And he said, يَوَدُّ أَحَدُهُمْ لَوْ رَآنِي بِأَهْلِهِ وَمَالِهِ. He said, some of those people, they would be able to sacrifice their wealth and their families and their loved ones just to see me. So he certified for us that, he testified for us that concept of love, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you need to check that yourself in your heart, that do you love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam or not? Khalid ibn al-Walid, this companion, he lived for a while after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and these say every single night he's sleeping, he's crying, and he's thinking about the Prophet, and he's thinking about the companions who passed away. And he keeps making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, Ya Allah, I'm missing my friends, I'm missing my companions, I'm missing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So just like make me reunite with them as soon as possible. He wasn't wishing for death, he's just missing his friends and missing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, a while or maybe way after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was asked once, how was your love to the Prophet? How did you guys, he was asking about all the companions, how did you guys love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? So he responded, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, he said, Wallahi, he was more beloved to us than our families, and then our wealth, and then our parents. And even then, and he used this beautiful expression, he said, even then the cold water in the very hot day. He said, when you are in a very hot weather and you're really missing the cold water and you are like being killed by thirst, he said, we miss him more than that feeling of a person who misses that cold water in that situation. One time, Umar ibn al-Khattab, during the time of his caliphate, he used to do what is so called in tradition the asas. Asas means that the leader, the president, or a person who's in charge of this city or locality, he would go out during the night and he would just like explore the streets of the city, and he would just try to check on people that everything is okay. And he was the caliph and he would do this little job. And he was passing by a house in the middle of the night, and he noticed that the lights are open. And there was a voice of an old lady in the house who was like knitting some dress, and she's chanting a couplet of poetry, saying على محمد صلاة الأبرار صلى عليه الطيبون الأخيار. She's saying that it's a couple of poetry that she's saying that she's sending the prayers of the righteous people to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. صلى عليه الطيبون الأخيار قد كنت قواما بكا بالأسحار. She is mentioning the Prophet that he used to stand up at night all the time to worship and devote himself for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then she says, يا ليت شعري والمنايا أطوار. It's an expression in Arabic that expresses about sorrow and sadness, that like death comes and goes, and it takes some people and leaves some other people. This what the meaning of it. يا ليت شعري والمنايا أطوار هل تجمعني وحبيبي الدار. She said, would it come that day when the house would reunite me with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Once again, she's talking about the Jannah, inshallah, on the Day of Judgment. So they said, Umar stopped in the street. He sat down and he cried. Because this lady reminded him with his love to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We can mention a lot of these stories about the love of the Sahaba to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the reason I'm introducing with this is we need to think ourselves. How do we view the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in our life? And then more specifically, how do we read or learn about the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? We have a kind of let's say a trend, speaking about the seerah or the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is trying to basically amplify the perspective of him being a great leader, for example, or being like a genius person, or being like a political activist, or a person who is a social reformer, as they call him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All these different aspects that people are trying to describe the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with, and there is no doubt that the Prophet sallam, of course, had a great portion of most of these different perspectives of the character sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Or some of the people who would think about the conquests of the Muslims after his death, when Islam expanded that big in the world at that time, to be a kind of a certain political revolution against the whatever political economical system that was prevailing back then in time. The problem about these things is that when we are translating the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ from these modern theories and modern dogmas, we have to be very careful. So again, we are influenced by the way we see politics and the way we see our social lives nowadays. So when we view the futuhat, and some writers wrote about the conquests of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ from this angle, that it was a left-wing revolution. One of the writers said that about the futuhat. He said it was a left-wing revolution against the extremism of the right wing at the time, economically and socially. This is the way he understood the seerah, because the filter in his mind is the modern filter that he has about politics. So he wasn't saying that's bad, but he was trying to explain how was what was the main motive or incentive of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ to spread the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which we claim that was not the incentive of the companions. And even back to the points, the different angles of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, yes, of course, he introduced a lot of reformations in the social system and the political system and the religious system, a lot of different things, but this is not number one unique thing about the Prophet. Number one unique thing about the Prophet is that he was a prophet. Number one unique thing is that Allah revealed to him a Quran. Allah revealed to him a wahi. Without the wahi, he wouldn't be that prophet. Without being the chosen one, the Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that means he wouldn't get this superiority over every single other human being. He wouldn't have that superiority over actually all the creatures of Allah. We took that in Aqidah before, that he's the best of creatures, not only human beings, best of creatures, best of even better than the angels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وأفضل الخلق على الإطلاق نبينا فمن عن الشقاق. Is the best of beings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. The greatness of the character of the Prophet ﷺ is one fruit of him being a prophet, receiving wahi and revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This has to be number one characteristic we view the Prophet ﷺ through. And then after that, we talk about him to be the president, the political activist, the social reformer, the leader of the army, whatever different jobs and things the Prophet ﷺ manifested from his character. Of course, he had a big deal of portions in all these things. What causes us these confusions, again, is the random filters and preconceived notions that we have in our minds most of the time when we read about our deen. We accept it or not, we are influenced by a lot of modern dogmas or concepts that when we read our deen, we get so much confused. I'm talking about specifically nowadays. One concept we'll deal with along the time we're reading the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ is the concept of ghaib. And we talked about this in the Aqidah. The unseen, the metaphysics, the things that we do not have materialistically control over. And we don't know how to control, or we don't know how to deal with. And we don't actually, not only that, we don't actually have any dalil or any proof that would prove these things to be true, except that it happened during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. That's why at the beginning of the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises those who believe in him, saying, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. Those who believe in the unseen. وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةِ. And then they establish the prayer. Because their aqidah precedes their practice. The way they view Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes first. And we talked about this a lot before. So when we deal in the seerah and we find a lot of situations that there is no explanation materialistically for whatsoever except the fact that it happened. When we speak about al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, the miraculous journey and the ascension of the Prophet ﷺ to the heavens. If you do not believe in ghaib, no way to believe in this. And it's a waste of time to discuss with someone who doesn't believe in ghaib about the Isra wal-Mi'raj to be an actual story that happened to the Prophet ﷺ. That's why this problem of believing in al-ghaib, the problem of materialism that we all again are so influenced by, the problem of individualism that we all are very influenced by, and this is one of the common cultures that we have nowadays, that all the thing is just revolves around the individual. The individual has become the Rabb of nowadays, has become the Lord of nowadays. Everyone just wants how to please the individual, how you would be happy, and you don't care about anyone else. Like the culture of I don't care, and the culture of it doesn't matter, and the culture of like just be happy and forget about the entire world. And this actually is piercing all the spheres of our life, even on the smallest levels. Like even advertisements and marketing, right? Everything is just how would you be happy? How would you be pleased about whatever is being presented to you? This concept is not an Islamic concept. This concept is not. Islam doesn't really revolve around the individual. Islam has a huge value for the family. Islam has a huge value for the community. Islam has the huge value for the ummah and the sense of unity of the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The problem of scienticism that actually has become a religion people now adopt. That if whatever doesn't go through science, I would never accept it. And this is very close to the materialism. I'm just mentioning random examples that all these things you need to be mindful of before reading the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. If you have all these, I'm not saying all these things are wrong, but I'm saying you have to be mindful of them and to separate between the realms these things are exploring and dealing with. Because if you're reading the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, you'll be hit by a lot of these things. If the fine lines between these things are not clear in your mind, you will have a problem absorbing the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. That's why the main purpose of this course, inshallah, is not only that we are sharing the stories of the Prophet ﷺ. It's not a storytelling session. So we're not meeting in this course to just share stories about the Prophet. This will happen, of course, but this is not the only goal of this course, to share the stories of the Prophet ﷺ. We have multiple other goals that comes as one of the first priorities and the first principles of this class, is that whatever we learn about the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in terms of rulings, in terms of principles, in terms of ahkam, we need to see them. We need to see them manifested in a living example. So whatever you learn about aqidah and whatever you learn about the rituals and the practices of this religion, if you cannot relate to a living example of these ahkam and these rulings, you cannot really follow them. If you do not see the development of the legislation of this religion and what happened before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislated all these things that we have nowadays, if you do not see and read about the history of this development, you cannot really relate to this religion enough. You need another purpose of this class. You need to understand the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Again, as a prophet before being a whatever other title that we give the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Another purpose is we need to understand who is our best role model sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and what is the meaning of لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. He was the best example and the best role model for you. Another purpose of this class is how can we understand the Quran? Because a big part of the Quran has asbab nuzul, has occasions of revelation. And this ayah was revealed because of that story, because of that situation, because of whatever incidents that happened during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Understand the context and the history of this will help you a lot understand the Quran and the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Seerah teaches you aqidah, teaches you ahkam, teaches you akhlaq and ethics and manners of Muslims. Seerah gives you, if you're a person who are involved in any kind of tarbiyah or ilm work, if you are basically helping raising awareness or helping like volunteering for something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you need to know some educational ways and some da'wah ways of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you need to read the seerah. If anybody who's involved in a da'wah program, he has to study the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And finally, part of the reasons of this, or part of the goals of this class, is understanding all these different perspectives of the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. that he was a prophet, he was a dad, he was a husband, he was someone who's part of that community, he was one who's a teacher, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one who is a social kind of, as we said, reformer, that he helped people socially a lot to adopt with the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those are mainly the main like goals we are trying, inshallah, to achieve from this course, inshallah. The seerah of the Prophet ﷺ as a science, it was developed as a science. The documentation of the seerah started very long time ago in history. Very early, even before the scholars of hadith started to compile the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, they started compiling and collecting the traditions of his seerah and his life story, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Actually, the sons of the Sahaba, they started doing this. Urwa ibn Zubayr ibn al-Awwam he's the son of Zubayr ibn al-Awwam, one of the close companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That was basically like 60, 70 years after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is not really too far after his death. He started to collect and to write and document the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Aban ibn Uthman ibn Affan, the son of Uthman ibn Affan, he wrote some documentation of the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And some other Sahaba and Tabi'een, they did the same thing. And then they came in the second Hijri century, some other scholars wrote about the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, until a person whose name is Muhammad ibn Ishaq. This is the first biggest station in the different phases of the documentation of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. Was 152 after the Hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ. Imam al-Shafi'i said, whoever wants to read, study, learn about the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, he has to go through Muhammad ibn Ishaq. So if you want to go deep, specifically in the seerah of the Prophet, this is the man to go. Muhammad ibn Ishaq, rahimahullah. Then a lot of other scholars came after this Imam, and then they started writing bigger encyclopedias about the life of the Prophet ﷺ. They started making like large and big poems, qasa'id, documenting the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. And the scholars would explain these qasa'id in big books, like Imam Al-Iraqi wrote an alfiyya. Alfiyya means like 1,000 verses of poetry, documenting the main incidents of the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And then like 6 or 7 different scholars from different generations, they wrote explanations on this poem of Imam Al-Iraqi, rahimahullah. To understand the beginning of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, you need to understand the world map at that time. Back then, there was the biggest two empires back in the time, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, or like right before the time of the Prophet ﷺ, was the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire. The biggest two empires and countries that were existing that time. And then after them come the Greek civilization and the Indian civilization. So we're talking about 4 different dominant, basically, empires or civilizations at that time. Roman, Persian, which is the 2 biggest, and then the Greek and the Indians. Each one of them has a lot of characteristics, and if you're interested in history, you can read a lot about the whatever empire of them. Of course, there are a lot of books of history that would talk about them. Persians had a lot of philosophical problems and philosophical debates and fights between them, that most of the time it would have the religious touch just to cover their conflicts and the wars that happen between them. They have a lot of problems with ethics. Not only from Islamic perspective, even human ethics, they had a lot of problems with this. The way they conducted their social life was really weird for the people at that time, of allowing a lot of very unaccepted relationships between people in a very weird manner. Romans, they had a lot of problems between the different sects of Christians. So the Christians of Asham at that time were in a big conflict with the Christians in Egypt at that time. A lot of wars would happen between them with a very bad economical system that caused a lot of oppression for the citizens of these civilizations. Greek and Indians were not really in a better shape than the other two. And again, we're describing basically the absence of a kind of general guidance that would control all of this. I would organize all of this. That's why a very important philosophical question we have to think about is that those people had a kind of a sense of civilization, but they didn't succeed really. They had a kind of an advancement compared to their time, but they were not really successful in their life. These empires didn't last. And that's why we as Muslims, when we view these things, we have a different lens, because is it only about a civilization? Is it only about how strong your infrastructure is? Or is it only about how advanced you are in technology? And of course, these things are so important, but is it only about this? So those people back then, because now the next point we need to discuss, why was the Arab, why Islam, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the Arab, chose the Arabian Peninsula to be the start of this religion? If those people were much more advanced in terms of a civilization, which they were, why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choose the Romans to be the starting point of this ummah? Or the Persian, or the Indians, or the Greek? They had sciences, they were much more literate than the Arabs at that time, they were much more advanced, even in terms of the structures of their systems, or the magnificent civilization of the architectures that they had, and all these big palaces and big cities that they built. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have chosen them if He willed. But again, is it only about this or not? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the things you reflect and you relate this to, when Allah mentioned the very old nations in the Quran, like Ad, Thamud, and all these different nations, right? And He is talking to them. Of course, the Prophet is talking to them, Sayyidina Salih, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching him. He's telling them, أَتَبْنُونَ بِكُلِّ رِيعٍ آيَةً تَعْبَثُونَ. He said, he first described how creative and how very advanced they were in terms of craving their houses and palaces in the mountains. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الَّتِي لَمْ يُخْلَقْ مِثْلُهَا فِي الْبِلَادِ. About Ad, He said there was nothing created like this before. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself, He testified that that was one of the best things that human beings produced. But then the Prophet tells his people that you are building all of these things because you're just like wasting your resources and you're just like playing around with these things. Like, what is the point if you're building all of this but you're lacking the divine guidance of this? And that was the question that all the nations and civilizations were stuck with. And the bigger question is that the people who think they contradict each other. Because also some Muslims didn't understand this right, and they thought that, okay, we don't really need all this advancement, we just need to be Muslims and that's it. Because they thought, okay, it's either or. Whether I would be very advanced and I would be at the top of the advancement of whatever industry that we have in the world in the time we're living in, or I would be a good Muslim, a person who only worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yes, we say in terms of the compass of the lens the Muslim has in his eyes, seeing this word, of course, the main purpose of this religion is that you need to worship Allah. This concept of worship. Every single thing you achieve, you accomplish in your life has to be within this angle. If it doesn't, there is no point. And every single decision you make in your life, you have to have this basically parameter for. What I'm doing now, is it within the concept of worship Allah or not? If it's not, it's a waste of time. This is what Islam is teaching you. You are living here temporarily. You're not responsible for the entire world. You're not responsible for these huge missions that most likely you're not going to be able to make. You're responsible for certain things and you have very limited time to do. And you never know what time you're going to die. And if you die before accomplishing the things that He wanted you to do, you're in trouble. This is long story short Islam, right? So now I need to utilize my time within the capacity that Allah has given me, and I need to make the best use of it. Do I worry so much about results? No. Do I worry so much about what is going to happen after I'm doing this? No. As long as you're trying your best to do it the right way, don't worry about the results that would happen. So it just needs a kind of a balance between both. That yes, our main goal is not the civilization and the advancement, because everything has to be towards the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at the same time, if this would help us to accomplish the success of this life and the concept of the succession of Allah on earth, khilafatullahi fil ard, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described Adam alayhi salam, then I have to make sure that I succeed in this. And this is again a concept that we will see along the way we're talking about this here, inshallah. So if I'm given this introduction and we ask that question, why was the Arabian Peninsula the place that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed this religion in? So what do you think, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the Arab to be the first people to receive the final message that He sent to humanity? Yes?
Geographically, it's in the center, so it becomes a lot easier to spread energy.
Location-wise, it's in the center between east and west. Okay. Yes.
Because we were the least developed nation on the earth.
The least developed nation, and why is that an advantage?
Allah, not advantage, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the message to the most least people, so everyone else should believe.
Okay. So there are the least educated, for example?
Yes.
Okay.
It's in everything.
Okay, yes.
Because of the level of ignorance, the pagan practices that were taking place.
Okay. Is it the same point that it would be better, it would be easier for other people to adopt? Or you mean out of sympathy for those people?
Sympathy, like those people needed to change, they needed to be enlightened.
Okay. Yes.
The characteristics the Arabs have some characteristics other nations don't have. as a generosity,
Okay.
the way they speak, their presence.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Isn't it to prove that very point? Like that we don't have to be so, I guess you could say modern or like so technologically advanced for,
Mhm.
you know, because there's other priorities.
Okay, so to prove the point of the purpose of life.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
They were experts in language, so they could help spread the message.
To take what?
They were experts in language,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can help spread the Quran and the message.
They can help spread the Quran. Okay. Any other thoughts?
Morals of our nations at that time.
The morals of Arabs. Okay. Okay. There is a part. Yes.
And they were the keepers of the house of Allah.
The what?
They were the keepers of the house.
The keepers of the haram of the Kaaba of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is a theory that was introduced by some people who wrote about history and seerah. I'm just gonna share it with you and you give me your opinion about this. They said that maybe part of the wisdom is that the people who already adopt a certain kind of religion or philosophy or ideology, like what happened in the Greek and the Indians and the Romans, it's much harder for them to change their opinions than the Arabs. That's why Allah chose the Arabs. I mean, this part of the wisdom is not the only reason. Do you think this is the right argument or not? Yes.
Weren't there Jews in Medina who would speak of the coming of the Prophet?
Sorry, say that again?
There were Jews in Medina who would speak of the coming of the Prophet.
Okay.
And one of the theories is that people were more receptive because they knew that the Prophet was coming.
Yes, okay, but sorry, it's a little bit different than, that's correct, but this is a little bit different than the point I'm making. The point I'm sharing here is the people who follow or believe in other religions, or whatever you want to call it, any theological system, they believe in it, it's much harder for them to change their beliefs.
No.
So that's why Islam or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the Arabs or this area for people who didn't really, so Arabs already had some religious practices, but they didn't have this strictness to follow a certain religion. So that's why it was easier for them.
No, I don't agree because the Arabs were very embedded in their own traditions and they're very tribal people. And many of them did end up rejecting because they didn't want to believe in something that their forefathers had not followed, even if they knew it was true. So like they had their own form of like traditionalism and that they didn't want to give up something that was held so dear for generations or something.
Yes, but who would adhere to his practices or theories more? The Arabs, the pagans, or Christians or Jews, for example? Or Persians and their Majusiya or whatever their religion. That's the theory. How adherent the person would be to his i'tiqad or aqidah.
I think, like, I agree with that because of the fact that, like, the Persians and Romans, and like, they were such a powerful force, and it was almost like they were on just such a high level, like, they didn't want to get down. The Arabs, they didn't really have anything, like, even geographically, the only reason why you would go there is to do pilgrimage. Like, there isn't a reason why you want to go to Mecca.
But they're not in the center between one of the sisters mentioned that it's in the center between east and west.
Yeah, but like other than like the trading thing, like nobody wants to go to Mecca, and they didn't have much power or anything, you know.
Okay, so I think to understand this theory more, you need to put it in part of another question. Why was the Prophet ﷺ ummi, illiterate? Why did Allah send him to be a Nabi al-Ummi, to be the unlettered prophet? Are they related, these 2 points? So he chose Arab, and we agree the Arab were much less educated than the rest of the civilizations in general, right? And then he chose the Prophet ﷺ to be a prophet who is Ummi, who cannot read or write. Are they related, these 2 concepts?
Yes.
Yes.
I think that it came to the Arabs at the time because it shows the universality of the message. That it can come to some of the most ignorant people and change their ways, and that means it can come to some of the most modern, developed people, and they'd be willing to accept. Because like in the Arab Peninsula, you had, even though they weren't the most modern, there was different like levels to the society. So you had people that were very like still modern, probably going on caravans and merchants and seeing what was going on. So if they're willing to accept, it shows that this message will be accepted by all like levels of society.
And this also responds to the question of why the Prophet was illiterate?
Yeah, and that like it came to someone that was illiterate, unlettered, and he would be able to connect with the ignorant of the time, in a sense, because there's a commonality between them.
Okay, can you cite any part of the Quran that hints an answer to this question? Before getting other opinions. So reflect on this ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he's telling him, وَمَا كُنْتَ تَتْلُو مِنْ قَبْلِهِ مِنْ كِتَابٍ وَلَا تَخُطُّهُ بِيَمِينِكَ. He said, you've never ascribed a scripture before this one. وَلَا تَخُطُّهُ بِيَمِينِكَ. And you never ascribe one with your right hand. Then he says, إِذًا لَارْتَابَ الْمُبْطِلُونَ. He said, otherwise the false fires would have had a cause of doubt, or a cause for doubt. What does that mean? If he was lettered, not unlettered, how would that be a cause of doubt and problematic thoughts of people? Yes?
If he was already educated or lettered, people could argue that he copied this religion or learned from other religions or other cultures.
Which he kind of did even after he was illiterate, but it was obviously false because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him that in the Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded to him in the Quran saying he is illiterate, and he responded to him because the Arabs said afterwards, after he was sent, that he's copying a person from different area. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exposed him by saying لِسَانُ الَّذِي يُلْحِدُونَ لَهِ أَعْجَمِي. He said the guy they're referencing, he doesn't speak Arabic. So he was mocking them. He said وَهَذَا لِسَانٌ عَرَبِيٌّ مُبِينٌ. How would he copy someone who doesn't speak Arabic and this book is being given to you in Arabic? So it was much easier for the Quran to respond to these doubts and misconceptions that people introduce. So what we're trying to do now is to reflect on the wisdom of this, right? And we will never be able to get the absolute wisdom of this, by the way. Because if Allah wanted the Prophet to be in Persia, He would send him in Persia, right? If He wanted him to be in the Roman Empire, He would do that. And He wouldn't just do that. He would do that and He would provide whatever means for this Prophet to have a successful mission to be accomplished. So number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-An'am, and we have to keep this ayah in mind all the time we're talking about the seerah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allahu a'lam haythu yaj'alu risalata. Allah knows best where to place the message. Because before the Prophet ﷺ, other prophets were sent to different nations. The majority of the prophets are not Arabs. The majority of the prophets and the majority of the divine books, they're not Arabs. So Allah knows where to place the message, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. But generally speaking, what we understood from the Quran is that وَمَا كُنْتَ تَتْلُو مِنْ قَبْلِهِ مِنْ كِتَابٍ وَلَا تَخُطُّهُ بِيَمِينِكَ. All these different points that the Quran mentioned, that why the Prophet ﷺ was sent as an unlettered in the middle of this uncivilized society he lived in. And then the rest of the reasons you mentioned, they're all right. The great position of Mecca in the middle of the Arabian Peninsula at that time, the centrality of the location of Mecca, that's actually a good point. Between the east and west, it made it a lot easier for the Sahaba to expand after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. The Arabic language is also one of the good points. And its centrality in the life of a Muslim is so important too. And the strength, I know I'm being biased, of course, talking about this, but really the power of the Arabic language that takes this superiority over most of other languages is really profound. It's something that is so inimitable. You cannot really produce, or you cannot get to a higher level of eloquence than the one that you get in Arabic language. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose that place to send the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And it was an extension of an Abrahamic religion. So most of the religion or all the religions have one core message, which is Ubudullaha ma lakum min ilahin ghayruh. It's repeated in the Quran. Worship Allah, you have no God except Him. So the core essence of the aqidah of all the prophets is one. Then the rituals, the practices, the ibadat, and whatever other legislative matters, they're different. So we pray different than the Christians, they pray different than the Jews, whatever different religion, I'm talking about divine religions, correct, authentic religions Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislated. The practices are different, but the core message is one. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, شَرَعَ لَكُم مِّنَ الدِّينِ مَا وَصَّى بِهِ نُوحًا. Allah, He has ordained for you the religion which He enjoined on Nuh, the first messenger Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the Prophet in this society. We always call this era to be the era of Al-Jahiliyyah, right? We translate it into ignorance, which is not an accurate translation. But I would better use the Arabic term here, because there is no one accurate word-to-word translation of this. It's the Jahiliyyah. Of course, it's derived from Jahl, from ignorance, that's correct. But this is not exact meaning the word is trying to provide. Because it doesn't merely refer to ignorance in terms of education, it refers to the ignorance in terms of lacking the compass of life. of lacking the divine guidance, like the rest of these civilizations lacked as well, by the way. So all those people, all the world in that time, they were lacking the divine guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Arab of this area, they are the descendants of Ismail alayhi salam, the son of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And they were Muslims according to the deen of Ibrahim alayhi salam for a good time, and then تطاول عليهم الأمد, طال عليهم الأمد, as the Quran says, like after a very long time, they forgot about the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they started introducing different fake beliefs in the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's one guy, his name is Amr ibn Luhay. Amr ibn Luhay, the first person who introduced the concept of idol worship in the Arabian Peninsula. The first one who introduced the concept of having an idol made of whatever and then asked people to worship it was this man. He was basically visiting Asham in a trade caravan, and then he saw some people there worshiping idols, and he asked them, like, what are you guys prostrating and bound to? And they said, just their aliha, their gods that we made. We asked them to intercede for us, to bring us rain and to bring us support and help. He said, can you give me one? I would take it to my people and they worship it there too. It was literally like this. And then gave him one of those fake gods they made. And this one is called Hubal, and maybe the name is a little bit familiar because it was the most famous idol or sanam in Mecca at the time. He took it with him back to Mecca and he asked people, you know what, that's a cool idea. It was basically like this. They just like worship this idol and start asking him for help. And then the concept of idol worshiping became very prevalent in the Salatin. They had after that hundreds of idols that they make themselves. They make by their own hands and then they worship it besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But interestingly, they still had kind of traces, remnants basically of divine, real rituals of the deen of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So the Arabs used to have Hajj. They have that pilgrimage. And they used to have Umrah, the major pilgrimage and the minor pilgrimage. They have Tawaf, these circles around the Kaaba, a Sa'i. All these things they would practice very close to the way we practice nowadays, by the way. They have the concept of Al-Hadi, the sacrificial animals that they do for the sake of Allah and then they offer it to the poor and the needy people. They shave after they do the Hajj. A lot of rituals of Hajj the Arabs used to do before. But the problem is, again, they didn't put all this together in one direction for the sake of Allah. When we go to Hajj, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gift it, all of you, when we make the tawaf, we say, Labbaik Allahumma labbaik, right? You're showing your full submission to Allah, that you are responding to the call of Allah to come to your house, to come to His house. The Arabs used to say the same word, Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. But what do we say after Labbaik Allahumma labbaik? Say, Labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, right? They would say, Labbaik la sharika illa sharika lak. And it's very contradictory because they said, Labbaik, yes, we show our submission to you, and there is no, you have no partner except the partner that you choose. So the first part of the sentence, they are negating the concept of partnership with Allah, but they say, unless if you choose someone to, because that's why they worship in their idols. Labbaik la sharika illa sharika huwa lak, tamlikuhu wa ma malakak. You own him, but he doesn't own you. So they want to basically give a kind of preference for those idols they're worshiping, but you are the supreme God, but they're like other small gods who are working with you. So they still believe in that concept. All these different fake beliefs that they had, they basically corrupted their religious system by doing this. You would hear a lot of beautiful stories about how brave they were, how generous they were, how honest they were. But at the same time, they would have very weird characteristics or things that they would do to people. They would help the oppressed and they would support people in most of the situations, but other situations they would oppress people, they would rob people, they would launch wars and wage against other people for no reason. So it was unbalanced. They respect women sometimes, and other times they really mistreated them. They respect free people so much, but they mistreat the slaves, whether males or females, so much. They respect the concept of marriage and family, and they would do it in a way that is very close to our way in Islam, but sometimes they would have very wrong ways of having relationships in a very wrong, messed up manner. So they didn't have that balance. They were really generally very wrong in the way they incorporated all of these actions in one system. There is one surah in the Quran that was revealed in Mecca in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the surah, discussed most of the wrong beliefs in terms of the aqidah of Arabs. There is one surah, it was the biggest surah that discussed the wrong beliefs of the Arabs during the Mecca. You know which surah is this? It's the only long surah in the Quran that was revealed at once. One shot. And it's a very long surah. It's one of the 7 long chapters just to make it easy. Yes. Sorry? Surah Al-An'am. It's one of the long surah in the Quran. It was revealed all at once during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Mecca. One of the scholars said, في سورة الأنعام كل قواعد التوحيد. Said all the principles of Tawheed are in Surah Al-An'am. If you want to understand the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Talks about their fake rituals, talks about the way they would slaughter animals, not for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Talks about their lottery, talks about their usury, talks about their like wrong relationships in terms of fornication and adultery. Talks about everything. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas says, certainly in the last third of the surah, he says, إذا سرك أن تعلم جهل العرب فاقرأ ما بعد 130 من سورة الأنعام. If you want to expose the ignorance of Arabs, read from ayah 130 in Surah Al-An'am until the end of the surah. They didn't have any stable political system. You either find one of two things. A king, and he has like a kind of a kingdom that he's ruling, this one kind of rulership they had, or just a tribal system. The leader of the tribe would have he would like basically enjoy all the privileges similar to the king on his kingdom. This is the only two ways of political systems that they had. In terms of the economy, the only thing they had is the trade business. They would have caravans, like exploring Sham and Persia sometimes. And the only way to secure this, or the only way for these caravans to be successful and to bring money, is to secure the trips. And this is in a society that all the time they're robbing each other and they're attacking each other. So it's very tough for you to have a successful trip for your caravan. So the only way for them to secure this, and this is very interesting for us, the only way to secure this is to travel during the Al-Ashhur Al-Huram, during the sacred months. They had 4 different sacred months that they cannot fight in, right? And Islam, Allah mentioned that in the Quran. Minha arba'atun hurum. Said the year is of 12 months, 4 of them are sacred. Sacred means you cannot fight, you cannot shed blood in this. That was even before Islam, and Islam respected this. So the only way that you would find a good secure way of conducting their trade business, that would be during the 4 sacred months. But that was their main source of income. They didn't have any kind of industry. Industry was kind of an alien to the Arabian Peninsula at that time. Most of the available industries will be just some knitting and some sewing that most of the time women would actually work on, and they would adopt this from the Yemeni culture, who were very good at these things. Little agriculture and livestock breeding. This is basically the economical things that the Arabs had. This is their life before Islam came. And the only thing left you need to realize is that they have a lot of good ethics and merits that they all share. And the more you read about them from that perspective, from their human side of being good people in general, you would really understand more the wisdom we talked about, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose those people. In terms of generosity, you would have the weirdest stories ever about how generous and hospitable those people would be when they just get a random guest, or when they are receiving each other. You would compete over this. You would compete over serving the Hujjaj. The pilgrims who would come to visit the house of Allah, you would compete over serving them, watering them, the siqaya as they call it, giving them water and giving them food. You would compete, and they would like pride over this all the time. That would get to a crazy level, like they would sacrifice most of their wealth to pay a ransom for a person, or to pay a blood money just to stop a bloodshed, so they get this reputation that this person who was the reason who stopped this war. Why? Because he paid whatever thousands or whatever number of money, just to get that fame. There was no goal, there's no religious goal for this, but just that was something that is self-inherent in them. At the same time, they want to gain their reputation among people. I stopped this bloodshed because I paid whatever number of money, for example. And most of the poetry, they're talking about this. Very big part of the poetry, at least, they're just competing over karam and over being generous. Sayyidina Hassan ibn Thabit, one of the Sahaba, who was a great poet, he was praising some people once in his poetry. So he wanted to describe how generous they were to the guests. So he kept talking so much about their characteristics, and then he said, يُغْشَوْنَ حَتَّى مَا تَهِرَّ كِلَابُهُمْ. So he says, usually when you live in a small group of tents in the desert, usually people have wild dogs to protect them. He's saying that these dogs all the time, they start barking and making noise once there is a stranger coming. So look at the way he wanted to build his metaphor. He said, for the unlimited number of guests that they're getting all the time, there's no time for the dogs to brag or to make any kind of noise. They would never issue any kind of voice because all the time their guests is coming to them. I know it's a very indirect way of saying that to you, but this is the way he wanted to describe it. In the second half of the verse, he said, لا يسألون عن السواد المقبل. So when you see a guest approaching you from a very far distance, you don't know who is that person. They don't ask who is he. Whoever is coming, he gets in, he has to get his whatever hospitality that they have to offer him. This is why, because that was one of their characteristics. They were so obsessed about this generosity to the extent that they would praise each other with how much they drink, because they are generous. Drinking was a sign of generosity for them. And that's why they called the grape tree, they called it Al-Karm. Al-Karm, it's from generosity. Shajaratul Karm, they called it the grape tree, the inab, they called it Shajaratul Karm, the generous tree. And that's why, and look at this, is very important. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, you know what? Do not call the grape tree Al-Karm. It's makruh in Islam and fiqh to call al-inab karm, to call the grapes to be the generous tree. The Prophet ﷺ said, لا تقولوا الكرم. Do not say that's the grape. It's just a makruh, it's not haram. But the Prophet ﷺ said that. Why? And look at this very interesting hadith to understand how would the Prophet ﷺ switch the mindset of people. So everybody's calling it the generous tree. He said, you know what? Do not call it the generous tree. And then he gave the reason why. He said, إنما الكرم الرجل المسلم. Said the actual manifestation of generosity is the Muslim person. So it was a big deal for people at that time, and that's the name that everybody is calling this tree. But he said, you know what? That's not a very good name. Why? He wants to change their philosophy about these things. The actual meaning of generosity is a person believing in Allah. إنما الكرم الرجل المسلم. It's the same hadith that at the beginning he said, لا تسبوا الدهر. Do not insult time, because Allah is the time. This is the beginning of the hadith. And again, because that was very common among people at that time. So he's switching some of these concepts that people just practice and believe in all the time in this very interesting way, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they would praise themselves by with drinking. Why would they feel generous about drinking? Because they say basically we are spending and wasting our money and we do not care. So it's a kind of a self-generosity that I myself benefiting from. Antara, this great poet, the very famous poet, was before Islam, and his story is very inspirational that I would really recommend reading. It was a black slave who was abused by his family and by his father and his stepmom, and he became one of the big champions of Arab slavery. He was saying about himself, he's bragging about himself in his famous poem, saying, فَإِذَا شَرِبْتُ فَإِنَّنِي مُسْتَهْلِكٌ مَالِي. He said, when I drink, I'm just wasting, I'm spending my money. But my reputation and fame is untouchable. He said, فَإِذَا شَرِبْتُ فَإِنَّني مُسْتَهْلِكٌ مَالِي وَعِرْضِي وَافِرٌ لَمْ يُكْلَمِ. Said, when I'm drinking, I'm just spending my money. I'm wasting my money. But my reputation, my fame, my honor is preserved. Nobody can touch it. And he's bragging about this. That's why I'm drinking to show my generosity to people. So they have a lot of these different competitions over being generous. One of the very far extreme examples, they said one of them, he was living by himself in the middle of the desert, and he ran out of most of the food he had, and then he was just sitting, has literally nothing to eat, and he found out that there was a guest coming. He felt so panicking because I need to honor my guest, and he's a person who didn't have food for 3 days. He wrote that in a poetry. He said, for 3 days I had nothing to eat, but now he's so worried that I just want to feed that guest. So they said it was the extreme to the extent that he said he was saying that in a beautiful way in his poetry. He said he saw he said a ghost coming from very far distance. He didn't realize yet who is that person who was coming. So he says فَقَالَ هَيَا رَبَّاهُ ضَيْفٌ وَلَا قِرَى. He's making dua to Allah, saying, my Lord, that there's a guest coming and I have nothing to offer him. Qira means that what you offer for the guest. So he's making dua saying, بِحَقِّكَ لَا تَحْرِمْهُ تَلَّيْلَةِ اللَّحْمَةِ. He said, just please do not deprive him of meat this night. So he's saying that in the poetry. He said, my son came next to me and he said, he noticed that he's very worried. He said, my dad, just don't worry. If you want, you can slaughter me and just serve me to whatever is coming. He said he seriously offered him this. He said his son came to him and he said, وَقَالَ ابْنُهُ لَمَّا رَآهُ بِحَيْرَةٍ أَيَا أَبَتِ اذْبَحْنِي وَيَسِّرْ لَهُمْ طُعْمًا. He said, if you want, you can just slaughter me and serve my meat for those people. And then the son kept explaining that why. He said, because we don't want this person, look at the very interesting mentality. He said, because we don't want this person to think that we have food but we didn't want to offer him, so he would go back and start talking bad about us. It's only just about fame. This is the main thing. Because basically they didn't believe in Allah at that time, that we understand now. But the only thing he cares about, it's so aib that people would just talk about us bad, that they got a guest and they didn't do something for that. And of course he was lucky, and after that he said in the middle of this very dramatic conversation, he saw like a small deer passing by and he hunted it, and then everybody ate and it was a happy end. But the concept is, they say it was a serious conversation. Allahu A'lam if it really happened this way. Sometimes poetry just needs to make things more dramatic. But this is a level of extreme generosity that they had. Even when they were gambling and playing game chances, or gaming like the games of chances, they would do that in a way of generosity, because most of the gains they get out of this, they pay it to the poor people. So most of the money they gain out of lottery, for example, on gambling, they would just pay it for the needy people. And that's why, again, back to the point of understanding the Quran, you would understand now when the Quran says قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعُ النَّاسِ. When the Quran talks about gambling and wine, and the Quran itself says it has some benefits. They both have some benefits, even about gambling. Yes, and then the Quran says وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. Their harm is bigger than their benefit. That's why the Quran said it's haram. That's it. But the Quran didn't deny, and that's a kind of a really fairness and understanding of the ayat. If you do not understand this context and this historical context of these ayat, you will find hard time applying them to relevantly to your life. So the Quran admitted that there is a benefit of these things, of the gambling and of the wine, because there's a culture behind this. It wasn't that easy. So generosity is one of their main things. Al-wafa'u bil-ahd, keeping their word and keeping their covenant. That was something crazy for the Arabs at that time. They would sacrifice everything just to keep the words. One of the famous poets of Arabs too, Imru al-Qais, one of the famous names, maybe a lot of you heard about him before. His dad was a king, and then his dad was killed in one of these wars that he had, and he wanted to take revenge for his dad. And he didn't have enough equipments and weapons to use in that war. He wanted to a friend that he had, who was a Jewish friend, was a leader of his people. And he had a big fort that he said, I want to leave my stuff with you until I'm going for that war, and I want to gather people and get some more equipments and weapons for my war. So he wanted him to have his amana of his family. He left his family in that fort, and he left whatever belongings he had. He said, I'm just giving you this as an amana. This person was a Jewish person. His name is As-Samawan, one of the very famous Arab leaders, of the Jewish leaders at that time. And then he left. So the people, the Imru al-Qais, this guy is going after to fight against, they heard of his moves. So they wanted to just take the initiative and surprise him. So they went, after he left, to that fort to negotiate with the person, the leader of that fort, and those people, to take the belongings and the family of Imru al-Qais so they can blackmail him. So when they went, and this Jewish man saw them coming, he closed all the gates of the fort. But he forgot his son outside. So when those people came, they talked to him from outside, and they said, give us the belongings and the stuff of Imru al-Qais. He said, no, I cannot give it to you. So they found his son outside. So they captured him. And they told him, you better give us his belongings or we're going to kill your son. So the story says the man didn't hesitate. He told them, kill him if you want. I will never give up on my word and my promise to the man. And they killed him in front of him. And then they just left. And he had no connection and no relationship with that man who gave him these belongings, to just sacrifice his son for his sake. And that's why the Arabs made a method out of this. The Arabs made a proverb out of this. They would say, "Awfa min as-samawat." Like when they see a person who's really a man of his word, you say like this man is like samawat. That is the name of that person. That he's now an example of keeping a covenant and keeping a word. And just keep in mind all the time, we're talking about people who have no sense of religion in the way that we understand. This person, this is samawat, this person, he's the one, he would say, إِذَا الْمَرْءُ لَمْ يَدْنَسْ مِنَ اللُّؤْمِ عِرْضُهُ فَكُلُّ رِدَاءٍ يَرْتَدِيهِ جَمِيلٌ. That if a person, his honor and fame is pure from any kind of vileness, whatever garment and cloth he's wearing, they will look good, they will look beautiful. Because it doesn't matter about the outward appearance, it really matters about your characteristics, about you are a man of your word, of your principles or not. And he would brag about himself all the time to be a person of sacrifice. He said, وَإِنَّا لَقَوْمٌ لَا نَرَى الْقَتْلَ سُبَّةً. He said, we don't take insult by dying. We don't care about dying. We can just die all the time. We don't care. We don't see death to be something bad to happen to us. He said, يُقَرِّبُ حُبُّ الْمَوْتِ آجَالَنَا لَنَا. We die young in age because how much we love death. This is how much he's bragging about his people. He concluded his poem saying, وَمَا مَاتَ مِنَّا سَيِّدٌ حَتْفَ أَنْفِهِ. He said, all of our masters and leaders, they will never die in bed. Right? Which means they always die in the battlefield. But by the way, this might imply that they get killed a lot. Right? If he says like no one of us dies at home, basically, that might imply, okay, so you guys get killed a lot. So basically you do not really win a lot of wars. But he completed in the second half of the verse, he said, وَمَا طُلَّ وَلَا طُلَّ مِنَّا حَيْثُ مَاتَ قَتِيلٌ. Whenever one of us is killed, we kill plenty of people for his sake. So he didn't want you to get the negative understanding of this. Like, yes, we all die in battlefields, but every single one dies from us. We kill a lot of people for this. We do not like leave our revenge. This society was the society the Prophet ﷺ was sent with them. This society was a society that produced Hilf al-Fudul, the covenant of al-Fudul, like a covenant to help the oppressed. That was in Mecca. The Prophet ﷺ witnessed him before Islam, before being a prophet. And he said, if I would be invited to a covenant like this in Islam, I would of course go for it. Because the people gathered, one man came from Yemen to have some business in Mecca, and he had a deal with a person, his name is Al-As ibn Wa'il. And then this person, because he was a big shot of the Meccan society, he just robbed him, he ripped him off. And he didn't give him the money. So the man kept going to people, just please help me get my money back, and they just ignored him because nobody can talk to this Al-As because he's one of the noblemen of Mecca. So he got up one of the big mountains of Mecca that's called Jabal Abi Qubays, it's still there. And then he kept shouting out loudly to people, saying poetry like, how come you oppress people and how come you are unfair? And he kept saying that for like one day. So one man passed by him and he felt so bad. He said like, you really need to do something for this man. And this man who said this was one of the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they gathered in a place, in a house called Dar ibn Jud'an. It's the name of the person who owns that house. And they made a covenant in one of the sacred months that whoever oppressed person we see, we have to support regardless. He's from here, he's a foreigner, he's from any family, we have to support him. And we have to be all one hand against all the oppressors in the society. And the Prophet ﷺ witnessed this hilf, this covenant that those people made. And he said, I wouldn't compromise this covenant for multiple red camels. Red camels are the most expensive camels at that time. He said, if I would be asked to uphold to such a covenant in Islam, I would definitely go for it. This is how much he appreciated that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So a lot of different stories about generosity, about keeping the word, about keeping the covenant, about having that sense of honor and dignity the Arabs had, about the firm will and determination, about the pure, simple environment in the Bedouin style that those people had. All this again put it in understanding the ayah. Allahu a'lamu haythu yaj'alu risalat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows where to place the message He sent subhanahu wa ta'ala. One last point I want to conclude with, that we need to know the name of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So here comes the awkward question. So how much do you know about the lineage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Without using Sheikh Google. Who knows like 5 grandfathers of the Prophet? 5 grandfathers of the Prophet. 5 names of the grandfathers of the Prophet. So no Google, one more time. Try to just squeeze your memory and get to something. Yes. Don't get it. Sorry. No. You made a big jump. What? No, go back. You're deceiving me. So Muhammad ibn Abdullah. So okay, the father, his name is Abdullah, right? Muhammad ibn Abdullah. Who's the grandfather? Who? Sorry? Abdul Muttalib. And then? Hashim. And then? Abdul Manaf. One more? Are you sure? You got it from the slide. Ibn Qusay, and then? Ibn Kilab, Ibn Murrah. Jamil. Right. So the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ is of 3 main parts. 3 main parts of the lineage of naming the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ. By the way, it's really part of your love to the Prophet ﷺ, and part of your Muslim identity, not just love to the Prophet, is to know his name. That's why the scholars used to say, for the kids, you have to tell them this basic information about the Prophet. So they say the kids, when they are growing up, you need to teach them how to pray, how to make wudu, and you need to teach them the name of the Prophet, and that he was born in Mecca and he migrated to Al-Madinah. This basic information that every Muslim has to know. We have really a big problem in our community about the lack of information about his life, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we really need to do that. And that was one of the incentives to organize this course, that we need to know more about him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. To us, maybe a certain generation or a certain way we were raised, I used to think there are basic information that is just axiomatic for Muslims to know about. That recently I've been shocked a lot in multiple situations that the main basic information that I thought personally that, okay, everybody knows about this, that it's really surprising that a lot of us do not know about them. In Ramadan, we had one of the youth qiyams, we had about the battle.
I do.
What?
I do.
Yeah, I'm saying it's a problem that we all share. In Ramadan, we had one of the youth qiyams about the Battle of Badr. And I used to think the Battle of Badr, we all know about Battle of Badr. Like the basic things. I mean, like it was the second year of Hijrah. It was like the caravan story of Abu Sufyan. The Prophet wanted to get it back and then they couldn't. They got in a fight, 300 against around 1,000. This information that I was supposing that a lot of us know about. But I got some comments and feedback. Alhamdulillah, it was a like successful interactive session. But some people told me personally that, yeah, I know the name Badr, but I didn't know really what happened. I was one of the imams in Toronto. He said he was given a seerah dars in the mosque, and then one brother, high schooler, I think he was like 16 years old. He raised his hand and he said, "Who is Muhammad?" I don't know what is that name. He's 16 years old. He's Muslim in a Muslim family. He said, "Who is Muhammad?" I know that's a far extreme example, but yeah, we really have a lot of problems about knowing and connecting with the seerah, the Prophet ﷺ. So do not think of these things I'm talking about to be very deep in seerah, because they're not. And do not also take them very lightly that we don't really need to know about all these things. It's very important to develop this connection with the Prophet ﷺ. So we have three main parts of his lineage. The first part is agreed upon. All the scholars agreed upon until Adnan. From Muhammad ﷺ until Adnan. And we will see in the slides. And then from Adnan to Ibrahim alayhi salam, there is a huge debate among the scholars about the exact names that they were trying to track or to trace back to the Ibrahim alayhi salam. Some of them, they said it's confirmed. Some of them said we don't know about it. Some of them said we're not sure about it. And they had multiple opinions about the names of those people. And then the third part is from Ibrahim all the way to Adam alayhi salam. And this part we have no Islamic tradition for. It's all from the other religions, from basically the scriptures of the other religions that mention the lineage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's all from Ahlul Kitab, from the people of the book that we have a full name until Adam. But I'm saying the level of certainty we have about the sihha or the authenticity of the lineage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So again, the first part is from Muhammad to Adnan, and then the second part is from Adnan to Ibrahim, and then the third part is from Ibrahim to Adam alayhi salam. Can you please get the slide of the name? Yeah, so the name is from Muhammad ibn Abdullah all the way down. There the other part is just about Amina. Who's Amina? Who? The mother of the Prophet. Just it mentions that she meets with him in the family tree, and which one? Who? They meet together. The Prophet ﷺ meet with his mom in which person? Kilab, the first one in that list. So Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abd al-Muttalib ibn Hashim ibn Abd Manaf ibn Qusay ibn Kilab ibn Murrah ibn Ka'b ibn Lu'ay ibn Ghalib ibn Fihr. Fihr is Quraysh. Quraysh is named Quraysh after this guy. So this is the start of Quraysh. This person, Fihr. This is a very remarkable person that is very important in this lineage tree. And then Ibn Malik, Ibn Nadr, Ibn Kinana, Ibn Khuzaymah, Ibn Udrika, Ibn Ilyas, Ibn Mudara, Ibn Nizar, Ibn Ma'ad, Ibn Adnan. Adnan is the great grandfather of the Arabs. And then this is the first part of his lineage, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is again agreed upon by all the scholars and all the historians and the scholars of Sirah. Hashim, the father of Abdul Muttalib, he was a very reputable, noble man of Quraysh. He was responsible for giving food and water for the Hujjaj when they come. We call it as-siqayatu wal-rifada. Rifada, when you give food to people, to the guests, and the siqaya is to give them water. When he died, Abdul Muttalib took the same responsibility after he died. But Abdul Muttalib, when he died, he was when Hashim died, he had a brother. His name is Al-Muttalib. The Abdul Muttalib is his own son. And then Al-Muttalib died while Abdul Muttalib And there's an interesting story why he was called Abdul Muttalib. He was not his Abd, he was not his slave, but he just called him by mistake. So one guy from a different part of the family, his name is Nawfal, he took all the charges and the responsibilities of Abdul Muttalib because he was like around 10 years old. And he robbed all his belongings from him. So it's a long story. So this little man, he went to the people of Quraysh just to support him against this Nawfal, this guy. They didn't want to support him. They said, we cannot do anything. We cannot get in one family between and your uncle to just solve your own matters. So he went to his uncles from his mom's side, who were in Al-Madinah at that time. And he sought their support. And they came in 80 horsemen. They waited Mecca. They went to Nawfal. And then when the guy stopped in front of him, I said, you better give him his belongings or I'm going to kill you right now. They came all the way just to return the rights back to their nephew. And then he did return all the things. And he made all the people witness in that situation like as witnesses for this return of the charges and the responsibilities that he gave it back to Abdul Muttalib. And then nobody would ever dare to take anything from Abdul Muttalib afterwards. It's a long story, but Abdul Muttalib then became famous because of this story, and then because of two main things. Number one, he's the man who digged again the Zamzam well. Because he saw a dream in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like inspired him to dig the Zamzam in a certain place. Because Zamzam was digged way before, during the time of who? Sayyidina Ismail. Right? We know the story. When Sayyidina Ismail was born with the Sayyidah Hajar. So they dig the Zamzam well. And then there was a very long history for Mecca before the Prophet ﷺ. And then it was, this well was gone. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired Abdul Muttalib to dig the pit of Zamzam, the well of Zamzam. And he did that. And that's why he became very famous with this. The second thing I'm going to stop here is that he was the main person who witnessed the incident of the elephant Harithatul Fil. The story that's in the Quran. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ. He was one of the noblemen who basically was witnessing this encounter with Abraha, this Abyssinian king who came to demolish the Kaaba to attract people to the other house that he built in Yemen at that time. And that's why he became very famous among the Arabs. Abdul Muttalib, who is the father of Abdullah, who is the father of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So inshallah we'll stop at this point of Harithatul Fil. Harithatul Fil, it happened the same year the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born. We call it Harithatul Fil, the incident of the elephant, because he came with the elephant in 60,000 soldiers that this king brought to demolish and to destroy the Kaaba. By the way, we call it al-fil, but it wasn't only one elephant. It was multiple elephants. But there was one big elephant that that king himself was riding. He said it had like 9 to 13 elephants. And the Arabs were not familiar with elephants. That's why they got really scared, because they've never dealt with elephants before. The Sahaba afterwards, subhanAllah, like way after, they had their first encounter with elephants. Do you know where? Qadisiyah, when they fought against the Persians. They used to use elephants in the wars. And they got really hard time feeding them because of this. They were like beaten a lot because of these elephants until they made up a way to just overcome this problem. But that was after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sorry?
When they migrate to Ethiopia,
When they migrate, maybe, in Ethiopia, maybe they had some, I don't know, maybe they had just some experience with elephants when they went to Ethiopia afterwards. So inshallah, starting from next time, we'll talk more about this story of the elephants and the birth of the Prophet ﷺ, and then we move forward, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you and to accept your efforts, inshallah, and to grant us the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.